Hi guys, and welcome to Bedtime History Relaxing. Tonight we slip quietly into a wooden city where dawn arrives not with noise, but with a soft glow through paper screens, where the floor beneath your feet still holds the night's chill, and where even the air feels as though it has been carefully folded and set aside until morning. You open your eyes in Kyoto in the 1600s, and already the day is asking something gentle of you. You probably would not survive this without a bit of adjustment. No central heating, no quick coffee, no rushing notifications, just the slow insistence of light and routine. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And feel free to share where you are in the world and what time it is for you right now. Now dim the lights. You lie still for a moment, noticing the faint texture beneath your fingertips. The tatami mat has a subtle give-woven straw, pressed flat by years of careful use. It smells faintly of dried grass, clean but organic, like something that still remembers the field it came from. Around you the room is quiet in a way that feels complete rather than empty. The wooden beams above do not creak yet. The walls do not echo. Everything seems to be waiting with you. A widely accepted historical understanding is that most homes in Kyoto during this period are built from wood, paper and natural fibres designed not for insulation, but for flexibility and airflow. In summer, this makes life more bearable. In winter, it asks you to be a little tougher. You feel that immediately as you slide your hand out from beneath your blanket. The air touches your skin with a coolness that is not harsh but very clear. It wakes you more effectively than any alarm ever could. You sit up slowly. The blanket shifts with a soft rustle cotton against cotton. Your breath is visible for just a moment in the early chill, a faint cloud that fades almost as soon as it forms. Outside something stirs. Not loudly, just enough to suggest that you are not alone in waking. You reach toward the nearest shoji screen. The paper glows with a pale, diffused light. It does not show you the outside world clearly. It only suggests it like a memory you cannot fully recall. The silhouettes of roof lines, maybe a tree, perhaps the edge of another house. You slide the screen open. The motion is smooth, almost silent wood gliding along its track, and suddenly the morning enters. The light is still soft, not yet bright enough to define every detail. It spreads across the floor in a gentle wash, illuminating dust motes that drift slowly in the air. Outside, the narrow lane is just beginning to take shape. The ground is packed earth, slightly uneven, still holding traces of yesterday's footsteps. You hear it now, the first clear sound of the day, a distant wooden clack, maybe a gate opening. Then the faint splash of water being poured. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs, the kind of quiet, habitual cough that belongs to early mornings everywhere. You step carefully onto the wooden threshold. The boards are cool under your feet, smoother than the tatami, but still marked by use. There is a subtle dip where countless steps have passed before yours. It makes you pause for a second, as if you have stepped into a rhythm already in motion. A lesser known but fascinating detail is that many households begin their day before sunrise not out of preference but necessity. Without artificial lighting strong enough to extend productive hours far into the night, the day naturally stretches from first light to its fading edge. You feel that rhythm pressing gently against you now, encouraging you forward. You look down the lane. The houses stand close together, their wooden facades aligned with quiet precision. Each one seems both separate and connected, like individual breaths within a shared body. There is no empty space wasted. Every gap has purpose. Every surface has been shaped by hands that understood scarcity. The air carries a faint mix of scents: damp earth, wood, a trace of smoke lingering from last night's fires. It is not unpleasant, it is grounding. You inhale slowly, letting it settle. Historians still argue whether the people of Kyoto at this time experienced their city as crowded in the way we imagine today, or whether their sense of space was shaped differently by habit and expectation. Standing here, you feel both closeness and calm at once. The houses are near, but the morning is wide. A door slides open a few houses down. A figure steps out wrapped in layers that fall neatly into place. Their movements are quiet, practiced. They carry a bucket, the wood darkened by years of use. Without looking around, they begin their task as if the act itself is enough. You realize that you are part of this now. Not an observer, not quite separate, just another person stepping into the same shared beginning. Your feet adjust to the ground as you move a little farther outside. The earth is firm but not hard. There is a slight give with each step, a softness that absorbs your weight. It makes your movements quieter than you expect. From somewhere beyond the lane, a bell sounds, low, steady, not urgent. It lingers in the air, vibrating gently before fading. You do not know exactly which temple it comes from, but it does not matter. It marks time in a way that feels less like a command and more like a suggestion. You pause again, listening. A quirky detail that often surprises modern readers is that sound in cities like this travels differently because of the materials used. Wood and paper absorb and soften noise, creating an environment where even busy areas can feel subdued. You notice that now. Nothing echoes sharply. Everything blends. A faint breeze moves through the lane. It touches your face lightly, carrying with it the subtle coolness of the early hour. The edges of your clothing shift, fabric brushing against your skin. You become aware of your body in space, not in a rushed or pressured way, but in a quiet, steady awareness. You glance back at the room you left behind. The open screen frames it differently now. It no longer feels enclosed. It feels like an extension of the outside, just another layer in the same environment. The boundary between inside and outside is softer than you are used to. Another figure appears, this time carrying a small bundle of kindling. They move past you with a slight nod, not stopping, not staring. Just an acknowledgement that you exist within the same morning. It is enough. You begin to walk, not quickly. There is no reason to hurry. Each step feels deliberate, not because you're forcing it, but because the world around you moves at this pace. The lane curves slightly ahead, disappearing between more wooden facades, promising more of the same quiet unfolding. The sky above shifts almost imperceptibly. The pale light deepens just a little, enough to reveal more detail. Roof tiles catch the brightness along their edges. A thin line of smoke rises from somewhere nearby, straight at first, then bending as it meets the air. You notice the absence of something you expected. There is no sudden burst of activity, no sharp transition from night to day. Instead, everything builds slowly, layer by layer, like a piece of music that begins almost inaudibly. You breathe in again, deeper this time. For a moment, you simply stand there between the room behind you and the city ahead, aware of both, belonging fully to neither, and yet to both at once. It is a quiet balance. And then, without quite deciding to, you take another step forward, letting the morning carry you gently into whatever comes next. You continue along the narrow lane, the coolness of the morning still resting lightly against your skin. The sounds you noticed before begin to gather not all at once, but gradually, as if each household is adding its own small note to a shared rhythm. A wooden bucket taps softly against a well frame. A broom brushes against packed earth in slow, steady strokes. Somewhere behind a thin wall, water is poured into a basin, the gentle splash followed by the faint clink of ceramic. You follow the sound of water. It draws you toward a small open space between the tightly arranged houses, where a neighbourhood well sits slightly sunken into the ground. The wood around it is darkened from years of damp hands and dripping buckets. The rope, thick and worn smooth, hangs ready, its fibres slightly frayed in places that have seen the most use. A widely recognised historical pattern shows that shared wells were central to daily life in cities like Kyoto, especially in densely built districts where individual water sources were rare. These spaces were more than practical. They were quiet points of contact where routines overlapped and small exchanges took place without much ceremony. You approach slowly, careful not to disrupt what is already happening. Two figures are already there. One lowers a bucket into the well with practiced ease, guiding the rope hand over hand. The other waits, holding a wooden pail against their hip, shifting their weight slightly to stay warm in the morning chill. Neither speaks at first. There is no need. The work itself fills the silence. You watch the bucket descend, disappearing into your shadow. For a brief moment the rope slackens, then tightens again with a soft jolt as it meets the water below. A faint echo rises from the well distant and hollow, followed by the quiet sound of filling. The person pulling the rope does so with steady strength. Not hurried, not strained, just consistent. The muscles in their arms move beneath the fabric, subtle but controlled. When the bucket reaches the top, water glistens along its edge, catching the early light in small trembling reflections. A lesser-known detail is that water management in early modern Kyoto was carefully regulated by local communities with shared responsibility for maintenance and fair use. Standing here, you sense that structure not as a rule imposed from above, but as a habit lived daily. Each movement feels practiced, understood, expected. The filled bucket is lifted and poured into the waiting pail. The sound is soft but full, a steady stream that ends with a gentle splash. A few drops spill over, darkening the ground below. The earth absorbs it quickly, leaving only a slightly deeper shade to mark the moment. You step closer. The rope is offered to you without words, a simple gesture, a small nod. It is not an invitation so much as an assumption that you will take part. You reach for it. The texture surprises you. Rougher than it looks, slightly damp, carrying a faint scent of water and wood. You begin to lower the bucket yourself and feeling the weight shift as it descends. The rope slides through your hands with a controlled friction, not painful but present enough to remind you that this is physical work. When the bucket hits the water, you feel it through the rope, a subtle change in tension. You pause for a second, letting it fill, then begin to pull. It is heavier than you expect, not impossibly so, but enough that your arms notice. You adjust your stance, placing your feet more firmly on the ground. The movement becomes a rhythm. Pull, gather, pull again. The rope coils loosely beside you, forming uneven loops on the earth. You become aware of your breathing, of the slight warmth building in your shoulders despite the cool air. It is a quiet effort, but a real one. When the bucket reaches the top, you lift it carefully, trying not to spill too much. The water inside is clear, reflecting the sky in a soft, wavering pattern. For a brief moment, you see your own face there, distorted slightly by the movement. You pour it into an empty pail that's been set beside you. The sound is satisfying in a simple way, like completing a small task that fits neatly into the morning. A neighbour beside you gives a faint smile. Not broad, not lingering. Just enough to acknowledge that you have done your part correctly. You notice now how the space feels different from just a few minutes ago. It is no longer quiet in the same way. There is more motion, more presence, but still no rush. People arrive, take their turn and leave. The rhythm holds. A quirky observation recorded in some accounts is that these shared spaces often served as informal information networks where news, gossip, and small details of daily life passed quietly from person to person. You sense that possibility here, even if this particular morning remains mostly silent. A glance, a slight shift in posture, a brief exchange of words too soft to fully hear. It all carries meaning. You lift the pail. The weight is steady, pulling slightly at your arm. It changes the way you walk, making each step more deliberate. You feel the water move inside a gentle surge that keeps time with your pace. As you turn back toward the lane, you notice the ground more carefully now. Small grooves have formed where countless feet have walked while carrying similar loads. The path is not marked by design, but by repetition. It guides you without needing to be pointed out. You pass a doorway where someone is sweeping. The broom moves in slow arcs, gathering dust and debris into a small pile that will be carried away. The sound is soft, rhythmic, almost soothing. The person sweeping pauses briefly to let you pass, then resumes without comment. There is a quiet understanding here. Each task matters, even if it seems small. A point often emphasized by historians is that daily labor in early modern cities was continuous and shared with little separation between personal and communal responsibility. As you walk, you feel that idea not as an abstract concept, but as a lived experience. Your morning is already connected to others, even in these simple acts. You reach the threshold of your house again. The wooden boards feel slightly warmer now, touched by the growing light. You step inside, setting the pail down carefully to avoid spilling. The room greets you with the same calm it held before, but it feels different now. Not because it has changed, but because you have. There is a quiet satisfaction in having already done something, however small. You kneel beside the pail, dipping your hand into the water. It is cold, clear, refreshing in a way that sharpens your senses. You splash a little onto your face. The sensation is immediate, waking you more fully than anything else could. Droplets run down your skin, cool at first, then warming as they settle. You take a breath deeper now, more grounded. Outside, the sounds continue to build. Footsteps pass more frequently. Voices still low begin to appear. A door closes with a soft thud. Another opens. Somewhere nearby, a child laughs briefly before being hushed. You realize that the day is no longer beginning. It is already underway. You sit back for a moment, hands resting lightly on your knees, listening to it all. The water beside you reflects the shifting light, small ripples fading into stillness. And then, as naturally as before, you rise again, ready to step back out and follow the city as it moves into its next rhythm. You step back into the lane with the faint coolness of water still lingering on your skin, and the world feels just a little more awake than it did moments ago. The light has strengthened not harshly, but enough to bring sharper edges to everything. Rooflines stand out more clearly. The grain in the wooden facades reveals itself in fine lines and knots. Even the ground beneath your feet seems more defined, its uneven surface now easier to read. You begin to walk without a clear destination, guided instead by the gentle pull of movement around you. Ahead, a row of shop fronts begins to open. The transformation is subtle. Wooden shutters are lifted and folded back. Sliding panels are adjusted. What was once a closed wall becomes a display of goods and activity. A merchant kneels just inside the threshold, arranging items with careful attention, aligning them so that each piece is visible but not crowded. A commonly accepted historical insight is that Kyoto's streets were organized by trade with certain districts known for specific crafts or goods. This created a kind of quiet order where people knew where to go for what they needed. As you walk, you sense that structure without needing a map. The repetition of similar items, the familiar tools, the shared gestures all guide you. You slow your pace. A young apprentice hurries past you carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth. Their steps are quick but controlled eyes focused ahead. They move with purpose but not with panic. It is the pace of someone who understands both urgency and expectation. You glance into one of the open shops. Inside, a low counter separates the space. Behind it, shelves hold neatly arranged goods, each placed with intention. The merchant's hands move steadily, adjusting, straightening, preparing. There is a quiet pride in the way they handle each object, as if presentation itself is part of the craft. A lesser-known detail is that many businesses during this period operated as family enterprises with skills and responsibilities passed down through generations. Standing here, you can imagine how these movements have been repeated for years, perhaps decades each morning, unfolding in a similar way. You continue along the lane as it begins to widen slightly, allowing more people to pass without brushing shoulders. The increase in space brings a subtle shift in energy. Conversations, though still soft, are more frequent. A pair of women walk side by side, speaking in low tones, their voices blending with the ambient sounds rather than rising above them. You notice how everyone seems aware of each other's presence. There is a carefulness in movement. People adjust their steps, shift their path, make room without needing to be asked. It creates a flow that feels almost choreographed, though no one appears to be directing it. Historians still debate whether this level of social coordination was enforced by strict cultural norms or developed organically through long practice. As you move within it, the distinction feels less important than the result. It works. It feels natural. A vendor sets up a small stall along the side of the street. The items are simple, arranged on a low platform. The vendor pauses after placing each one, taking a moment to look to adjust slightly to ensure that everything feels balanced. It is not rushed. It is not careless. You pause near the edge of the street watching. The air carries new scents now. cooked rice faint but comforting, a hint of miso warm and slightly salty. The smoke from small cooking fires rises in thin streams drifting upward before dissolving into the morning. A quirky observation from period accounts notes that early morning streets in cities like Kyoto often carried a mix of domestic and commercial smells, blending household life with public activity in a way that would feel unusual in more modern separated environments. You notice that blend now. It is not chaotic, it is layered. You take another step forward and your foot brushes lightly against something small on the ground. A fallen leaf dry and curled at the edges. You look down at it for a moment, then continue. Even this small detail feels placed within the larger rhythm. Further ahead, a man stands near the entrance of a larger building, adjusting his clothing with deliberate care. His posture is straight, his movements precise. There is a sense of formality about him, even in this early hour. You wonder briefly about his role, his place within this ordered space, then let the thought pass. The street begins to connect with another slightly busier path. Here the movement increases again. More people, more goods being carried, more small interactions. A porter walks by with a balanced load suspended across his shoulders, the weight evenly distributed. His steps are measured, each one placed carefully to maintain balance. You instinctively step aside, giving him room. He passes with a slight nod, his focus never fully leaving his path. The rhythm of his movement continues uninterrupted, the load swaying gently but never dangerously. You become aware of your own pace again. You are moving more slowly than many around you, but it does not feel out of place. There is room here for different speeds as long as each one remains attentive to the whole. The light shifts again, brighter now, casting longer, clearer shadows. The warmth begins to touch the surfaces around you, soft at first, then more noticeable. The coolness of the early morning starts to fade, replaced by a gentler, more neutral air. You pass another shop where a woman arranges folded fabrics. The colours are muted but rich layers of texture that catch the light in subtle ways. She smooths each piece with her hand, pressing out small creases, aligning edges so that they form a quiet pattern. There is care in every movement, a sense that even the smallest detail matters. You pause for just a second longer than necessary. She notices, looks up briefly and offers a small polite acknowledgement before returning to her task. It is not an invitation to linger, but it is not a dismissal either. It is simply a recognition. You move on. The sounds of the street continue to build but never overwhelm. Footsteps, voices, the soft clatter of wood and ceramic. Each sound remains distinct, yet part of a larger whole. You realise that nothing here feels accidental. Every action, every placement, every movement contributes to a shared environment that is both structured and fluid. It holds you without restricting you. You reach a point where the street opens slightly again, offering a wider view ahead. The city stretches out, still low and wooden, but now fully awake in its own quiet way. You stop for a moment, taking it in. The morning has moved forward without rushing you, carrying you along step by step from the stillness of your room to the growing life of the streets. You feel that transition now, not as a sharp change, but as a gentle unfolding. And as you stand there watching the steady flow of people and purpose, you begin to sense that this is only the beginning of what the day will show you. You follow the widening street as it gently guides you toward a busier heart of the city, where the sounds begin to overlap just a little more, and the air carries a deeper, richer mix of scents. The pace does not become frantic, but it gains a kind of density, as if more layers of life have gathered in one place. Ahead, the market begins to reveal itself. It is not announced by a sign or a sudden boundary. Instead, it unfolds gradually. Stalls appear closer together. Goods become more varied. Voices, though still measured, are more frequent, weaving in and out of each other like threads in a fabric. You step into it almost without noticing. To your left, a vendor kneels beside sacks of rice, the grains pale and uniform, catching the light in a soft, almost powdery glow. He runs his hand through them slowly, letting them fall back into place as if demonstrating their quality through touch rather than words. A well-established understanding of urban life in early New Period Kyoto is that rice functioned not only as a staple food, but also as a unit of wealth and exchange. Standing here, you can sense that importance in the way it is handled with care, with quiet attention, never treated casually. You move closer, watching. A customer crouches opposite the vendor, their conversation low and deliberate. There is no loud bargaining, no dramatic gestures. Instead, the exchange feels restrained, almost thoughtful, as if both sides are balancing not just price but relationship. You continue walking. The ground beneath you changes slightly. It is more worn here, more compacted, marked by countless steps that have passed through this same space day after day. You feel it in the way your foot settles more firmly, more predictably. To your right, a woman tends to a pot set over a small flame. Steam rises in thin, twisting lines, carrying with it the warm, savoury scent of miso. The aroma is immediate, comforting in a way that feels almost instinctive. You notice how people passing by glance briefly toward it, not stopping but acknowledging its presence. An intriguing and somewhat overlooked detail is that prepared foods were often sold in small quantities for immediate consumption, offering convenience in a city where many households still cooked, but did not always have time in the middle of the day. You see that here in the small bowls stacked neatly beside her, ready to be filled. You pause just long enough to feel the warmth of the fire as you pass. It contrasts gently with the cooler air that still lingers in the shadows, creating a subtle shift that your body notices before your mind does. The balance of temperature, of scent, of sound all seems carefully held. Further along, you encounter a stall displaying bundles of vegetables. They are arranged not in abundance but with intention. Each bundle tied neatly placed so that its shape is clear, its freshness visible. The greens are slightly damp, catching the light in tiny reflections that suggest they have been recently washed. A child stands nearby, watching the vendor with quiet focus. Their hands are tucked into their sleeve posture, still eyes attentive. You sense that they are learning not through formal instruction but through observation. Every movement, every exchange becomes part of their understanding. Researchers continue to explore how knowledge was transmitted in such environments, often concluding that daily participation served as the primary form of education for many. Standing here, it feels obvious. The market itself is a kind of classroom, though no one calls it that. You move on. The sounds shift again as you pass a fish seller. The scent arrives first, sharper than the others, carried on the air with a clarity that is impossible to ignore. It is not unpleasant, but it is direct, reminding you immediately of the source. The fish are laid out on a flat surface, their scales reflecting light in small shifting patterns. The vendor works quickly but not carelessly, adjusting their placement, ensuring that each one is visible. A customer points, a brief exchange follows, and the transaction is completed with minimal words. The efficiency is quiet, almost understated. You notice how little weight there seems to be. Every space is used. Every item has a place. Even the movements of people seem to avoid unnecessary motion, conserving energy in ways that feel subtle but constant. A curious note found in some historical accounts mentions that early morning markets often operated with a kind of unspoken etiquette where excessive noise or disruption was discouraged, not by rule, but by shared expectation. You feel that here, even with many people present, the atmosphere remains composed. You step aside as a porter passes, carrying a load that sways gently with each step. The wooden frame across his shoulders creaks softly, the sound blending into the background rather than standing out. Your eyes drift upward for a moment. Above the stalls, the rooftops form a layered pattern lines, intersecting at slight angles, creating a sense of depth that is both simple and complex. A thin thread of smoke rises from somewhere behind them, dissolving into the brightening sky. You return your attention to the ground level. A small group gathers around a stall selling something you cannot immediately identify. The items are wrapped carefully, their contents hidden but suggested by shape. The vendor speaks a little more here, their voice still calm but slightly more animated as they explain. You linger at the edge of the group. There is a brief moment where you feel the closeness of others more distinctly, the shared space narrowing just enough to remind you of your place within it. But it does not feel uncomfortable, it feels contained. A faint breeze moves through the market, stirring loose edges of cloth, shifting the steam from cooking pots carrying scents from one stall to another. It ties everything together in a way that feels almost intentional. You take a slow breath. The mixture of rice, miso, vegetables, fish, wood, and air settles into something that is uniquely this place, this moment. It is not one scent, but many layered without overwhelming. You realize as that time is moving, though it does not feel rushed. The light has grown stronger, casting clearer shadows beneath the stalls. The morning is no longer tentative. It has arrived fully, and the market reflects that. You begin to move again, letting the flow guide you toward the edge of this busy space. As you step away, the sound softens slightly, the density easing. The market continues behind you, steady and ongoing, while you carry its impressions with you. The warmth of the cooking fires fades, replaced again by the open air of the street. The ground feels a little less worn, the space a little wider. You glance back once, just briefly. The movement continues uninterrupted, as if it will carry on whether you watch or not. And then you turn forward again, following the street as it leads you deeper into the city where other kinds of work and quieter forms of skill are waiting to be noticed. You leave the market's steady hum behind, though it does not vanish completely. It lingers faintly like an echo carried along the street, gradually softening as you move into a quieter district. The air feels a little clearer here, less layered with food and fire, more focused on wood, fabric, and the subtle scent of work in progress. The buildings change in small but noticeable ways. The front spaces are more open, not to invite crowds, but to allow light and air to reach inside. You can see deeper into them now, past the threshold where tools and materials occupy carefully arranged spaces. Nothing appears random. Every object seems to rest exactly where it is needed. You slow your steps. Inside one workshop, a man sits cross-legged on the floor, a piece of wood held steady between his knees. His hands move with quiet precision, guiding a blade along the surface. The sound is soft, a gentle scraping that repeats with each pass. Thin curls of wood fall away, gathering in light, fragile spirals at his side. A broadly accepted observation about Kyoto in this era is that craftsmanship was not merely economic activity, but a defining feature of the city's identity, with entire neighborhoods shaped by specialized trades. Watching this, you understand why. The work is not hurried. It carries a sense of continuity, as if each motion connects past to present. You linger just outside, careful not to intrude. The craftsman does not look up immediately. His attention remains fixed on the wood on the line he is shaping. Only after a few moments does he pause, glance toward the entrance, and acknowledge your presence, with a small, almost imperceptible nod before returning to his task. You move on. Further along, the air shifts again. A faint earthy scent reaches you, deeper and slightly sweet. It draws you toward another open front space where lengths of fabric hang in gentle folds. Their colours are muted but varied, some deeper, some lighter, all softened by the morning light. Inside, a dyer stands beside a series of shallow vats. The liquid within them reflects the light in still dark surfaces. The dyer lifts a piece of cloth, slowly letting the excess drip back into the vat. The fabric emerges, transformed, its colour richer, more defined. The motion is deliberate, almost ceremonial, as if rushing would disrupt something essential. An interesting and often overlooked aspect of this work is the reliance on natural dyes derived from plants, minerals, and other organic sources, each requiring careful preparation and timing to achieve consistent results. You see that care here in the patience of the process, in the way nothing is forced. You watch as the cloth is stretched, gently inspected, then set aside. There is no wasted movement. Each action flows into the next with a quiet logic. You continue walking the street, guiding you past another workshop where a different rhythm takes hold. Here the sound is lighter, more rapid. Thin strips of material are being shaped and assembled into fans. The pieces are arranged in neat stacks, their surfaces smooth, their edges precise. A worker folds and aligns them with practiced ease, the repeated motion creating a soft, almost rhythmic tapping. There is something calming about the repetition. You notice how the worker's hands move without hesitation, as if the pattern has been internalized completely. The body remembers what the mind no longer needs to think about. Scholars continue to examine whether such repetitive labour led to a sense of fulfillment or quiet fatigue among artisans, with interpretations varying widely depending on perspective. Standing here, you sense both possibilities. The work is steady and controlled, but it asks for constant attention. You take a few steps closer, drawn by the texture of the materials. The surface of the fan paper catches the light in a soft way, not glossy but gently reflective. The wooden ribs beneath are thin and flexible, bending slightly as they are handled. Everything feels balanced between strength and delicacy. You move on again. The street remains calm but not empty. Others pass through, some carrying tools, others delivering materials. A bundle of wood rests against one wall, neatly stacked, its ends aligned. Nearby, a set of tools hangs in order, each one placed so that it can be reached without searching. A small detail catches your attention. On the ground near one doorway, a line has been worn into the wood where the threshold meets the street. It is subtle but clear, a mark left by countless steps crossing the same point. It reminds you again of how time is recorded here, not in grand gestures but in small repeated actions. A curious note from historical descriptions mentions that many craftsmen lived and worked in the same space, blurring the boundary between home and workplace. As you look into these interiors, you begin to notice signs of that. A folded blanket in the corner, a small cooking area tucked behind the main workspace. Life and labour intertwined. You pause briefly, listening. The sounds here are different from the market, less varied, more focused. The scrape of tools, the soft tap of assembly, the occasional murmur of voices. Each workshop has its own rhythm, yet they align in a broader harmony. A faint breeze moves through the street, carrying with it a mix of scents. Wood shavings, damp fabric, a trace of something metallic from tools. It is a quieter blend than before, but no less distinct. You become aware of how your own presence fits into this space. You are not working, not carrying, not producing, and yet you're not out of place. You're simply another figure moving through, observing, absorbing. The city allows for that as long as you remain respectful of its pace. Ahead, the street curves slightly, revealing more workshops, more open fronts, more glimpses into skilled hands at work. You take a slow breath. There is something deeply steady about this part of Kyoto. A sense that no matter the season, no matter the changes elsewhere, this work continues. Quiet, consistent, essential. You walk on your steps, soft against the ground, the sounds of craftsmanship following you like a gentle thread. And as the street begins to open once more, hinting at another shift in the city's rhythm, you carry with you the quiet understanding that everything you have seen so far rests on these hands, these tools, and these patient repeated motions. You follow the curve of the street as it opens into a slightly brighter stretch where the morning light settles more fully on the surfaces around you. The shadows shorten and the cool edge of the early hour softens into something gentler. You feel it on your skin first, then in your breathing, as the air becomes less sharp and more even. People pass you in a steady flow, and you begin to notice something that was there all along, but only now comes into focus. Clothing, not just as something worn, but as something carefully chosen, adjusted and aligned with the moment. Layers fall in deliberate ways. Sleeves hang longer or shorter depending on the task. Fabrics move differently as each person walks, some light and flowing, others thicker and more structured. You slow your pace watching. A woman passes with robes that shift softly. As she moves, the fabric catching the light in a muted shimmer. The colours are subtle, not bright, but they carry depth. A faint pattern appears only when the angle of light changes, then disappears again as she continues. A widely accepted historical observation is that clothing in Kyoto during this period was closely tied to season status and social context, with even small details reflecting an awareness of time and place. You begin to see that here, not as a rule, but as a quiet language spoken without words. You glance down at your own sleeves. The fabric feels different now that you're paying attention. The weight of it, the way it rests against your arms, the slight warmth it holds, is not just protection from the air, it is part of how you move through it. Ahead, a group gathers briefly near the edge of the street. They are not stopping for long, just enough to adjust something. One person straightens another's collar, smoothing it with careful hands. The gesture is quick, familiar, almost instinctive. There is no fuss, no extended conversation, just a shared understanding that presentation matters. You move past them, noticing how even small adjustments carry meaning. An interesting detail noted in historical accounts is that seasonal awareness extended deeply into daily life, with people changing fabrics, colours, and layering techniques to reflect not only the weather, but also cultural expectations of harmony with nature. Standing here, you sense that awareness without needing to name it. It is visible in the way lighter materials appear as the day warms, in how heavier layers are folded or tied differently. You feel the air again. It is still cool, but no longer cold. The warmth of the rising sun begins to touch your shoulders, creating a gentle contrast between shaded and open spaces. You find yourself stepping slightly toward the light, not consciously but naturally. A man passes carrying a bundle of garments draped over his arm. The fabrics vary in texture. Some appear smooth and tightly woven, others softer with a slight irregularity that suggests handwork. As he walks, the layers shift against each other, producing a faint whispering sound, almost like leaves brushing together. You follow that sound for a moment, then let it fade as he turns down another path. Further along, you notice a small shop dedicated entirely to clothing. The front is open, revealing neatly folded garments arranged in careful stacks. Each piece is placed so that its colour and texture can be seen without disturbing the whole. The arrangement itself feels intentional, almost like a quiet display of balance. You pause at the entrance. Inside, a shopkeeper lifts a garment and shakes it gently, allowing it to fall into place. The movement is smooth, practiced. They run their hands along the fabric, smoothing it, aligning it, then fold it again with precise, even motions. Scholars still debate how much personal expression individuals could exercise through clothing within the constraints of social hierarchy during this era, with some suggesting subtle individuality and others emphasizing strict conformity. As you watch, you sense a blend of both. The forms are consistent, but the details carry variation. You step a little closer, drawn by the textures. The fabric under your fingertips feels cool and slightly firm, then softens as you press more gently. It holds its shape, yet yields just enough to feel alive. You withdraw your hand, careful not to disturb the arrangement. Outside, the street continues to flow. A child runs past, their smaller form wrapped. Simpler layers, the fabric shorter, more practical. Their movement is quicker, less restrained, the clothing adapting to their pace rather than guiding it. You notice how different garments shape movement. Longer sleeves encourage slower gestures, heavier layers ground each step. Lighter fabrics allow for quicker motion, a subtle freedom that contrasts with the more structured forms around you. A faint breeze moves through again, lifting the edges of the clothing, causing small ripples that travel across the surface. It reveals how each layer responds differently, some barely shifting, others fluttering lightly before settling back into place. You take a slow breath. The air now carries a softer mix of scents, less of the market, more of fabric, of wood, of the faint warmth of bodies moving through shared space. It is a quieter blend, but no less present. You begin walking again, more aware now of how your own clothing moves with you. The fabric brushes lightly against your skin. The rhythm of your steps echoed in its motion. It becomes part of your awareness, not distracting but steady. You pass a doorway where garments hang to air. They sway gently, not fully moving, just enough to suggest the presence of air. The light passes through them in places, creating soft variations in tone. It feels almost like looking at the season itself, held briefly in cloth. A small, almost unnoticed detail catches your eye. Near the edge of one garment, a faint repair carefully stitched, nearly invisible unless you look closely. It reminds you that these items are not disposable. They are maintained, preserved, carried forward. An observation sometimes highlighted by researchers is that clothing often held extended life through repair and reuse, reflecting both resourcefulness and detachment. You see that here in the care given to even the smallest imperfection. You continue along the street as it begins to shift again. The light grows stronger, the warmth more noticeable. The early coolness fades further, replaced by a balanced, comfortable air. The city feels fully awake now, its rhythms established, its movements steady. You glance around once more. Clothing, once just part of the background, now feels central, a visible expression of time, place, and quiet intention. It shapes how people move, how they are seen, how they belong. And as you walk forward carrying that awareness with you, the street ahead begins to hint at another layer of the city, one shaped not by work or trade, but by something softer, more inward, waiting just beyond the next turn. You follow the street as it narrows again, though this time the change feels quieter, more inward. The sounds of trade and craft soften behind you, replaced by a stillness that carries its own kind of presence. The air shifts as well. There is a faint trace of incense, now light and dry, barely there at first, then more noticeable as you continue. The buildings around you seem slightly set back, not by much, but enough to create a sense of space that feels intentional. The wooden facades remain, yet the entrances are different. Simpler, less open, as if what lies within is not meant to be displayed in the same way as goods or labour. Ahead, a temple gate comes into view. It stands quietly, not towering but grounded. The wood is darker aged, its surface worn smooth in places by time and touch. You approach without thinking, your steps slowing naturally as you near it. A well-documented feature of Kyoto life in this period is the presence of temples and shrines, woven directly into everyday neighbourhoods, making spiritual practice something encountered regularly rather than reserved for special occasions. Standing here, you feel that integration. There is no sharp boundary between the city and this space. It is simply another part of it. You pass through the gate. The ground beneath your feet changes. The packed earth of the street gives way to a more carefully maintained surface, raked in subtle patterns that catch the light in fine lines. Each step you take seems to matter more here, not because of rules, but because of the atmosphere. The sounds shift immediately. The distant movement of the city fades, replaced by quieter details. The soft crunch beneath your feet, the faint rustle of leaves, the occasional almost distant call of a bird. Everything feels slightly slowed, as if time itself has taken a deeper breath. You pause. To one side, a small structure holds a basin of water. A ladle rests across it, its handle worn smooth. You watch as someone approaches, lifts the ladle and pours water over their hands with deliberate care. The motion is calm, repeated, familiar. An intriguing and lesser-known observation is that ritual gestures like this, simple acts of cleansing before entering sacred spaces, often became habitual, even outside formal religious moments, shaping daily behaviour in subtle ways. You sense that here. The action is not performed for display, it is part of an internal rhythm. You step closer and follow the same motion. The water is cool, sharper than the morning air was earlier, sending a brief, clear sensation through your fingers. You let it fall away, watching it darken the ground below before disappearing. You move further in. A path leads you between carefully placed stones, guiding your steps without forcing them. The arrangement feels natural, yet you can tell it has been considered. Nothing is random here, even when it appears so. To your right, a small garden opens. It is not large, but it feels complete. Stones, moss, a few carefully shaped plants, all arranged in a way that invites quiet attention. You find yourself slowing even more, your gaze moving from one element to another, noticing details you might have missed elsewhere. You hear it then, a bell. The sound is low, steady, resonant. It does not demand your attention, but it fills the space, gently vibrating through the air and into your body. It lingers longer than you expect, fading slowly rather than stopping abruptly. You stand still listening. There is something about the sound that settles you not by force, but by presence. It does not change the world around you, but it changes how you experience it. Academic discussions continue to explore how daily religious practices influence the mental rhythms of people in early modern Japan, with some suggesting they provided structure and calm, while others emphasized their role in reinforcing social order. As you stand here, you feel both possibilities without needing to choose between them. A figure moves quietly along the path ahead. Their steps are light, almost silent, their posture composed. They carry nothing visible, yet their presence feels purposeful. They pass without looking directly at you, but you sense an awareness, a shared acknowledgement of being within the same space. You continue walking. The light here is different. Filtered through leaves and wooden structures, it falls in softer patterns, broken into smaller shapes that shift as you move. It feels less direct, more diffused, creating a gentle contrast with the brighter streets you left behind. You notice the air again. It carries a subtle warmth now mixed with the faint dryness of incense and the freshness of the garden. It is a delicate balance, neither strong nor absent. A small shrine stands slightly off the main path. It is modest, almost easy to overlook, yet it draws your attention. Offerings rest before it, simple and carefully placed. You do not know who left them or when, but their presence suggests continuity, a quiet thread connecting moments across time. A curious detail sometimes mentioned in historical writings is that everyday offerings could be as simple as food or small objects reflecting personal intention rather than formal requirement. Looking at them, you feel that simplicity. There is no excess, only care. You stand there for a moment longer, not thinking of anything in particular, just allowing the space to settle around you. The sounds remain soft, the movements slow. Even your breathing seems to match the pace of the place. Eventually you begin to move again. The path leads you back toward the edge of the temple grounds where the sounds of the city begin to return faint at first, then more distinct. The transition is gradual, almost seamless, as if the two worlds are not separate but layered. You pass through the gate once more. The street greets you again, brighter, now more active, yet you carry something of the quiet with you. It does not disappear. It lingers, shaping how you notice what comes next. You take a slow breath. The city continues steady and unfolding, and you step forward ready to follow its next rhythm, one that feels less inward, more human, waiting just ahead. You step back into the brighter street, carrying the quiet of the temple with you, though it begins to thin as the sounds of daily life gather again. Voices are a little clearer now. Footsteps overlap more often. Somewhere nearby, wood taps against wood in a steady rhythm that feels grounded and familiar. You follow that sound. It leads you toward a row of homes and small shop fronts that feel less open than the market, less focused on display than the workshops. The entrances are modest. Sliding doors partially open, revealing only fragments of what lies within. It feels more private here, as if the city has turned slightly inward. You slow as you pass one doorway. Inside, a woman kneels on the floor, her posture straight but relaxed. In front of her, a low surface holds a spread of items, folded cloth, small tools, a bowl placed just to one side. Her hands move steadily, not hurried, not idle. Each motion is part of something ongoing. A broadly supported historical insight suggests that much of the essential labour sustaining urban households in Kyoto was carried out by women, often within spaces that were not publicly visible but were central to daily life. Watching her now, you sense how much of the city depends on these quiet, continuous actions. You do not linger too long, just enough to notice. Her hands pause briefly, adjusting a fold, smoothing an edge, then continue. The rhythm is uninterrupted, as if it has been repeating for hours already and will continue long after you move on. You walk further along. The sound you heard earlier becomes clearer. Another doorway, another interior. This time a woman stands near a wooden frame, working threads through it with careful precision. The movement is small but exact, her fingers guiding each strand into place. The threads catch the light as they shift, creating subtle variations in colour and texture. It is not a fast process. It asks for patience, attention and consistency. An intriguing and sometimes overlooked detail is that textile work, including spinning, weaving and repair, formed a significant part of women's daily responsibilities, often carried out alongside other household tasks. You begin to see how these activities overlap, how one motion leads into another, without clear separation. A child sits nearby watching. Their posture mirrors the adults in a smaller, less refined way. They do not interrupt. They simply observe, absorbing the pattern of movement, the sequence of actions. Now and then their hands mimic the motions in the air, practicing without materials. You move on, aware of the quiet learning taking place behind you. The street remains calm, but it carries a steady sense of purpose. You notice how often doors are partially open, allowing glimpses inside without fully revealing the space. It creates a feeling of connection without exposure. You pass another home where the scent of something cooking drifts outward. It is softer than the market, more contained, but still warm and inviting. You hear the faint sound of a lid being lifted, then set back down, a small adjustment part of a longer process. Ongoing scholarly discussions continue to explore the extent to which women's work in early modern cities was formally recognised or remained largely invisible within written records. As you walk past these spaces, it feels clear that visibility does not always match importance. The work is constant whether or not it is recorded. You notice your pace has slowed again, not because the street demands it, but because the details draw you in. Each doorway offers something small but complete a fragment of a larger pattern. Ahead, two women stand just outside a doorway speaking quietly. Their voices are low, their expressions calm. One adjusts the other's sleeve, smoothing it in a gesture that feels both practical and familiar. They share a brief moment of stillness before returning to their separate tasks. You pass by without interrupting. The ground beneath your feet feels slightly warmer now, touched more directly by the sun. The air has shifted as well, losing the last traces of early morning chill. It rests more evenly against your skin, no longer waking you but holding you. A small detail catches your attention. Near one doorway, a basket sits on the ground filled with items that appear worn but carefully maintained. Cloth folded and refolded tools placed neatly, nothing discarded without thought. It suggests a cycle use, repair, reuse, each stage flowing into the next. A curious observation from historical descriptions notes that household economies often relied on careful preservation and reuse of materials with little wasted and much adapted. You see that here in the quiet order of the basket in the absence of excess. You continue walking. The sounds around you remain soft but steady. The rustle of fabric, the faint clink of tools, the occasional murmur of voices, none of it rises above the rest. It all blends into a consistent background. You become aware of how much happens within these walls, not in isolation but in parallel. Each home holds its own rhythm, yet all of them align with the broader movement of the city. It is a network of quiet activity, largely unseen yet essential. You pass a final doorway where a woman sits mending a piece of clothing. Her hands move with practiced ease, guiding the needle through fabric, pulling the thread tight, then repeating. The motion is subtle, almost meditative. She does not look up as you pass, her attention fully absorbed. You slow for just a moment, watching. There is something deeply steady in that repetition, something that feels both ordinary and enduring. It does not demand recognition, yet it sustains so much. You move on. The street begins to shift again, opening slightly, the private spaces giving way to something more public. The sounds grow a little louder, the movement a little broader. You take a breath. The quiet labour you have just passed through lingers, with you not as a separate memory, but as part of the same unfolding day. It shapes how you see what comes next, reminding you that much of what holds this city together happens just out of sight. And as you step forward into the widening street, you sense another layer waiting, one that involves younger voices, lighter steps, and the early patterns of lives still being formed. You move into the broader street where the air feels a little more open, and with that openness comes a different kind of sound. It is lighter, less measured than before. You hear it before you see it. A brief burst of laughter quickly softened, followed by the quick patter of smaller footsteps. Children. They appear in small clusters, not in large groups, but scattered through the space like moving fragments of energy. One runs ahead, then slows, suddenly remembering something, perhaps a rule, perhaps a warning. Another follows more cautiously, glancing back toward a doorway where an adult watches without speaking. You adjust your pace to theirs without meaning to. A well-grounded understanding of daily life in early modern Kyoto is that children were integrated into work and household routines from a young age, learning through participation rather than separation. Watching them now, you see that balance between movement and responsibility, between play and expectation. A boy carries a small bundle held carefully in both hands. It is not heavy, but he treats it as if it matters. His steps are deliberate, his attention focused. When he reaches a doorway, he pauses, shifts his grip slightly, then steps inside. The movement is simple, but it carries a sense of purpose. Nearby, two younger children stand beside each other, their voices low as they speak. You catch only fragments a word here. A soft laugh there, then a sudden quiet as they notice someone approaching. Their posture changes instantly, becoming more composed as if slipping into a role they understand well. You pass them, and the quiet dissolves again behind you. An intriguing detail noted by observers of the time is that apprenticeships often began in childhood with boys and sometimes girls entering structured learning environments tied to specific trades or households. You begin to notice signs of that here. A slightly older child moves alongside an adult, mirroring their actions, carrying tools that seem just within their ability to manage. You follow them for a few steps. The adult does not speak much. A brief instruction, a small gesture, then silence again. The child watches closely, adjusting their movements to match. It is learning without explanation, knowledge passed through observation and repetition. You continue on. The street carries a mix of ages, now each one moving within their own rhythm, yet all connected. You notice how children occupy the edges of space, more often near doorways, beside walls, close enough to retreat if needed, but present within the flow. A small group gathers near a corner. They are not working, at least not in the obvious sense. One draws something in the dirt with a stick, the line forming slowly, then being altered, then erased. Another watcher then adds to it. The shapes shift, change, disappear. A curious note from historical accounts suggests that children's play often used whatever materials were available, turning ordinary surroundings into spaces of imagination without requiring dedicated objects. You see that here in the simple lines on the ground, in the way attention moves from one small detail to another. A sudden movement catches your eye. A child darts across the street quicker than the others, their steps light and uneven. For a brief moment their motion breaks the steady rhythm around them. An adult's voice follows, not harsh but firm. The child slows, immediately turning back with a subdued expression. You sense the boundaries. Freedom exists, but it is held within expectations. Movement is allowed, but not without awareness. The balance is constant, adjusted moment by moment. Scholarly conversations continue to examine how discipline was maintained in such environments, with some suggesting a strong emphasis on social harmony, while others point to more direct forms of correction. As you watch, it feels less like a system imposed, and more like a shared understanding reinforced quietly. You walk a little further. The sounds of work begin to reappear, blending with the lighter tones of younger voices. A door opens and a child steps out carrying a small container. They move carefully, slower than before, aware now of the responsibility in their hands. You step aside to let them pass. They nod slightly, not quite looking at you, but acknowledging your presence. The container remains steady, held with both hands, their focus unwavering. You notice how quickly roles shift. One moment movement and laughter, the next stillness and care. The transition is seamless, as if both states belong equally. The air feels warmer now. The sun has risen higher, touching more of the street, softening the shadows that once defined the space. The coolness of early morning has almost completely faded, replaced by a gentle warmth that settles evenly. You hear a different sound now, a rhythmic tapping lighter than the tools of craftsmen, more irregular. You follow it with your eyes and see a child practicing with small wooden pieces, tapping them together in a pattern that seems half learned, half invented. They pause, listen, then try again. There is concentration in their posture, a seriousness that contrasts with their earlier play. It suggests something forming a sill, not yet complete, but already taking shape. You move on slowly. The street begins to widen again, the presence of children blending more fully into the general flow of the city. Their movements become less distinct as they join the rhythm of adults, their actions aligning with tasks rather than play. A final detail draws your attention. Near a doorway, a small pair of sandals rests neatly beside a larger pair. The difference in size is clear, but the placement is the same, aligned carefully, suggesting that even small habits are learned early. You pause for a moment. There is something quiet in that arrangement, something that speaks of continuity. The small becoming the large, the learner, becoming the worker, the observer, becoming the participant. You take a breath. The sounds around you settle into a steady blend once more, the lighter tones of childhood now woven into the broader rhythm. equilibrium rather than standing apart. And as you begin to walk again, you sense a shift ahead, something more formal, more structured, where movement carries a different weight and presence itself begins to feel more deliberate. You step into a stretch of street where the atmosphere tightens just slightly, not in a harsh way, but in a manner that makes you more aware of your posture, your pace, even the placement of your hands. The easy flow of earlier moments remains, yet something beneath it feels more deliberate now. You notice it first in how people move. Conversations soften a little. Steps align more carefully. Those carrying goods adjust their paths with an added level of attention. It is subtle, but it gathers around you like a quiet signal that this part of the city follows a slightly different tone. Ahead, a figure approaches. Their clothing is more structured than most you have seen so far, the layers falling with a precision that suggests intention rather than habit. The colours are restrained, the form clean, the movement controlled. They walk neither quickly nor slowly, but with a steadiness that draws the eye without demanding it. A well-established historical understanding notes that Kyoto, though no longer the political centre in the same way it once was, still housed samurai retainers, officials, and those connected to administrative roles whose presence shaped the city's social atmosphere in subtle but noticeable ways. As you watch this figure approach, you sense that influence not as dominance, but as quiet authority. You step slightly to the side. Others do the same, almost instinctively. There is no spoken instruction, no visible command. The adjustment happens smoothly, each person creating just enough space. The figure passes. There is no direct acknowledgement yet. You feel a momentary shift as they move through like a ripple that travels outward and then settles. The street returns to its previous rhythm, but not entirely unchanged. Something lingers. You resume walking. A pair of men stand near the edge of the street, their posture attentive, their voices low. Their clothing mirrors the formality you just observed, though less pronounced. They speak briefly, then fall silent as another figure passes, their attention following, for just a moment before returning to their conversation. An interesting observation drawn from period studies suggests that samurai presence in urban environments often functioned as a form of visible order, reinforcing social hierarchy through everyday encounters rather than overt displays of power. You feel that here. Nothing dramatic has occurred, yet the space feels shaped by it. You continue forward. The buildings in this area appear slightly larger, though still constructed of the same materials. The entrances are more defined, the thresholds a little higher, creating a sense of separation between inside and outside. You notice how your own movement adjusts. Your steps become quieter, your pace more measured. It is not something you decide consciously. It happens in response to the environment, to the cues around you. A faint metallic sound reaches you. You turn your head slightly and see a man adjusting something at his side, the edge of a sword briefly visible before it settles again beneath the folds of his clothing. The motion is small, controlled, almost hidden. A curious detail often mentioned in historical records is that while swords were a symbol of status and authority, their presence in daily life was typically understated, integrated into routine rather than constantly displayed. You see that now. The object is there, but it does not dominate the space. You walk on. The air feels warmer still, the sun now fully present above the rooftops. Light falls more directly onto the street, casting clearer lines, defining shapes with greater clarity. Shadows remain, but they no longer soften everything as they did earlier. You pass a doorway where a man stands adjusting his outer robe. His movements are precise, each fold aligned carefully. He smooths the fabric with both hands, then pauses, checking the result before making a small correction. There is a sense of preparation, as if he's about to step into a role that requires attention to detail. You continue aware of how appearance and presence intertwine here. Analysts of the period continue to explore how much of samurai behavior in cities was governed by formal codes versus social expectation, with interpretations varying across sources. As you move through this space, it feels less like rigid enforcement and more like a shared understanding that shapes behavior from within. A group of younger men stand further along, their posture less formal, yet still influenced by the same patterns. They speak quietly, their gestures restrained. One laughs briefly, then lowers his voice again as if aware of the space around him. The balance between ease and discipline is constant. You pass them, noticing how quickly sound rises and falls. The street begins to open again, the intensity easing slightly. The presence of formality does not disappear, but it blends more fully into the broader rhythm of the city. You take a breath. The air carries fewer scents here. Less of cooking, less of craft, more of open space warmed by sunlight. It feels cleaner though, still connected to everything you've passed through. A final moment catches your attention. Near the edge of the street, a child stands, watching the figures you just observed. Their gaze is steady, curious, perhaps trying to understand what they have seen. After a moment, they adjust their own posture, straightening slightly, mimicking what they have just witnessed. You pause briefly. There is something quiet in that imitation, something that suggests how patterns are carried forward not through instruction alone, but through observation. You move on. The street ahead shifts again, the sense of formality fading into something more relaxed, more open. The weight of presence lightens, replaced by the familiar flow you've come to recognize. And as you step into that easing rhythm, you feel the day moving towards its middle, where the energy softens and the city pauses just enough to breathe. You move beyond the quieter tension of that street and feel the city loosen again like a breath released slowly. The space opens just enough for the sunlight to settle more fully on the ground, warming the packed earth beneath your feet. The air no longer carries the crisp edge of morning. It rests evenly now, gentle and steady. The rhythm around you begins to soften. It is not that activity stops. It simply changes shape. Movements slow slightly, voices lower. There is a sense that the day has reached a point where effort pauses, even if only briefly. You notice the smoke first. Thin lines rising from small cooking fires drifting upward, before dissolving into the brighter air. The scent follows warm and familiar rice, again miso again, but now richer, deeper, as if the heat has had more time to settle into the food. A commonly recognized feature of daily life in cities like Kyoto during this period is the importance of the midday meal as a moment of rest within a long working day, often simple but essential for sustaining energy through the afternoon. You feel that shift now, not just in the presence of food, but in the way people move toward it. You follow the scent. It leads you towards a cluster of small cooking spaces, some attached to homes, others set just outside where pots sit over low flames. The heat from them reaches you before you step close, a soft warmth that contrasts gently with the air. You pause near one. A person lifts the lid of a pot and a brief cloud of steam rises, carrying with it a concentrated burst of scent. It fades quickly, but not before leaving a clear impression. The lid is set aside, then replace the movement careful and practiced. You realize how quiet this moment it is. There is no rush to eat, no hurried gathering. Instead, everything unfolds slowly, as if the act of pausing is just as important as the act of working. An interesting detail sometimes noted in historical descriptions is that meals were often taken in smaller, more private settings, rather than large communal gatherings, especially during the working day. Standing here, you see that pattern. People eat near where they work within their own spaces, yet still connected by proximity. You move on. A man sits just inside a doorway, a bowl held in both hands. His posture is relaxed, shoulders slightly lowered, as if the weight of the morning has eased for a moment. He lifts the bowl slowly, taking a measured sip, then lowers it again. There is no distraction, no divided attention. The act is simple, complete. You pass quietly, not wanting to interrupt. Further along, you see a pair seated together, their conversation minimal, their focus shared between each other and the food before them. They speak in low tones, then fall into silence again, the pause comfortable rather than awkward. You become aware of your own body, a faint tiredness in your legs, a subtle heaviness in your steps that you had not noticed before. The morning has carried you forward without strain, but now in this slower moment you feel it. You stop near the edge of the street. The sunlight reaches you fully here, warming your shoulders, your hands, your face. It is not intense, just steady. You close your eyes briefly, letting it settle. A reflective observation often made by scholars is that midday pauses in pre-modern cities were not merely practical, but shape the emotional rhythm of the day, creating a natural balance between effort and rest. You feel that balance now, not as an idea, but as a physical experience. You open your eyes. A child sits nearby holding a small bowl, their movements careful but slightly less controlled than the adults around them. They watch each motion they make as if learning even in this quiet act. You notice how still everything feels, not silent but softened. The sounds of eating, of small adjustments of quiet breathing. Even the city itself seems to settle for a moment. A curious detail mentioned in some accounts is that people often carried their own utensils or bowls, maintaining personal items within shared environments. You see hints of that here in the variety of objects, each slightly different yet all serving the same purpose. You take a slow breath. The air carries warmth now mixed with the lingering sense of food and smoke. It feels fuller, heavier in a comforting way. You begin to walk again, but more slowly. There is no urgency. The pace of the city allows for this, encourages it even. You match it naturally, your steps quieter, your awareness broader. You pass another doorway where someone leans back slightly after finishing their meal, their posture relaxed in a way you have not seen yet today. It is a small release, a brief moment where effort gives way to rest. You feel something similar within yourself, not a need to stop completely, but a softening, a willingness to move without purpose for a few moments. The street stretches ahead bright and calm. The earlier intensity of movement has eased, replaced by a steady, gentle flow. People begin to rise again to gather their tools to return to tasks, but the transition is gradual. You pause one last time. The warmth, the quiet, the sense of shared pause all settle around you. It is a moment that feels complete in itself, not leading anywhere, not demanding anything. And then, as naturally as before, the city begins to move again. You feel it in the small shifts in the first steps taken after a rest, in the way voices return slightly clearer than before. You take your own step forward. The pause has passed, but its calm remains with you, carried gently as the day begins to lean toward its next unfolding. You move with the returning rhythm as the city gathers itself again after the midday pause. The softness lingers, but it begins to give way to something more deliberate, something that feels arranged rather than purely practical. The light has shifted slightly warmer, now stretching longer across the ground, touching surfaces with a quiet glow. The street guides you towards an area that feels different from the rest. You notice it first in the lanterns. They hang neatly along the edges of buildings, unlit for now, but already present, already suggesting what will come later. Their shapes are simple, their surfaces slightly textured, each one placed with care. You continue forward. The air carries a faint trace of something unfamiliar. Not the scent of cooking, not the dryness of wood or fabric, but something lighter, more delicate. It drifts past you and fades before you can fully place it. Ahead, the street narrows again, though this time the closeness feels intentional, almost curated. The buildings lean in slightly, creating a contained space where movement becomes more controlled, more aware. A widely observed aspect of Kyoto's urban life during this period is the existence of designated entertainment districts where music performance and refined social interaction were carefully regulated within defined boundaries. As you step into this space, you sense that structure immediately. The sounds begin to change. A faint note of music reaches you, distant at first, then clearer. It is not loud, it does not fill the space, it sits within it like a thread you can follow if you choose. You slow your pace. Figures move through the street with a different kind of attention. Their clothing is more elaborate, though still restrained. The fabrics fall in precise lines, the colours chosen with care. Movements are measured, gestures refined. You notice how posture becomes more deliberate here. A person pauses near a doorway, adjusting their sleeve with slow, controlled movements. Another steps aside with a slight turn of the body, allowing space without breaking the flow. An interesting observation drawn from historical records is that individuals working within these districts often trained extensively in music, dance, and conversation, cultivating a presence that combined artistry with social awareness. You see that training reflected not only in performance, but in how people carry themselves even in quiet moments. You pass a building where the entrance is partially open. Inside you catch a glimpse of a room arranged with careful simplicity. Cushions placed in even spacing. Surfaces clear, uncluttered. A single instrument rests against the wall, its form elegant, its presence understated. The music you heard earlier becomes clearer now. A few notes spaced with intention, each one allowed to settle before the next begins. It is not continuous, it breathes, leaving space between sounds. You pause just after. The atmosphere feels contained, not closed, but held as if everything within this space follows a shared understanding of restraint. Discussions among scholars continue to explore the balance between performance and authenticity in such environments, questioning how much of what was presented reflected genuine expression and how much followed established forms. As you stand here, the distinction feels less important than the effect. The space itself feels composed. You move on. The street curves slightly, revealing more doorways, more glimpses of similar interiors, each one different in detail yet aligned in tone. Nothing appears excessive, nothing feels accidental. A soft laugh reaches you from somewhere inside one of the buildings. It is brief, quickly quieted, but it carries a lightness that contrasts with the careful control of the surroundings. It reminds you that even within structure there is room for spontaneity. A curious detail noted in some accounts is that strict rules governed behaviour within these districts, shaping not only who could enter, but how they were expected to act. You sense those boundaries here not as barriers, but as a quiet framework that holds everything in place. You continue walking. The ground beneath your feet feels smoother here, more worn, as if the passage of people has been guided along specific paths over time. Your steps fall naturally into that pattern. A figure approaches from ahead. Their movement is slow, deliberate, each step placed with care. The fabric of their clothing shifts gently, the layers moving together in a controlled flow. Their gaze remains forward, their expression calm, composed. As they pass, there is a subtle exchange. Not words, not gestures, but a shared awareness of presence. It lasts only a moment, then dissolves as you continue. You become aware of the light again. It has softened slightly, the brightness easing into a warmer tone. Shadows lengthen, edges blur just a little, creating a sense of transition. You take a slow breath. The air feels different here, lighter in some ways, more refined in others. It carries fewer of the practical sense of daily life, replaced by something more subtle, more curated. You pass another open doorway. Inside, two figures sit, face each other, their posture composed, their conversation quiet. One lifts a small cup, the movement precise, controlled. The other watches, attentive, present. You do not linger. It feels as though to remain too long would disturb the balance, the careful arrangement of space and interaction. You move toward the edge of the district. The sounds begin to shift again. The music fading, the voices blending back into the broader rhythm of the city. The lanterns remain behind you unlit, waiting for evening. You pause once more just before stepping out. The atmosphere changes almost immediately. The open air returns, the sounds widen, the sense of containment eases. You take a breath. The experience lingers not as a separate memory, but as another layer added to your understanding of the city. A space where movement, sound and presence are shaped with intention. And as you step forward into the more familiar flow of the street, you sense the day beginning to turn again, carrying you toward a different kind of refinement, one rooted not in performance but in quiet ritual and thoughtful attention. You step away from the carefully composed district and feel the city open again, though the sense of refinement does not disappear. It follows you quieter, now settling into smaller spaces where attention turns inward rather than outward. The light has mellowed further, no longer bright, but warm and even, resting gently across surfaces. The street leads you toward a place that feels less about movement and more about pause. You notice it in the arrangement of the entrance. A simple threshold, a slight step up, the suggestion that you leave something behind as you cross. You do so without thinking, your body already attuned to the subtle signals of the day. Inside, the space is calm, not empty but uncluttered. A low surface rests at the centre with objects placed sparingly. Each one seems to hold its own presence, not competing, not crowded. A widely recognised feature of Kyoto's cultural life in the 17th century is the development of refined practices, such as tea preparation poetry and aesthetic appreciation, where simplicity and restraint were valued as expressions of deeper understanding. As you stand here, you feel that principle not as an idea, but as an atmosphere. You lower yourself to your sit. The floor beneath you is firm but comfortable, the texture familiar now. Your hands rest lightly in your lap. For a moment, nothing happens, and that feels entirely appropriate. A figure sits across from you. Their posture is composed, their movements unhurried. They reach for a small object, lifting it with both hands, turning it slightly before setting it down again. The action is simple, yet it carries a sense of intention that draws your attention. You watch. The silence is not empty. It is full held, as if each moment is given space to settle before the next begins. An often discussed aspect among historians is how these refined practices shaped social interaction, with some suggesting they fostered genuine mindfulness, while others view them as structured performances of taste and status. Sitting here, the distinction feels less important than the effect. The space encourages stillness. A small cup is placed before you. The gesture is precise yet gentle. You reach for it aware of your movement in a way that feels new, your hands slower, more deliberate. The surface of the cup is slightly uneven beneath your fingers, its texture subtle but present. It feels crafted, not perfect, yet complete. You lift it. The warmth reaches your hands first, then your breath as you bring it closer. The scent is light, almost understated, yet it holds your attention. You take a small sip. The taste is quiet, not strong, but clear. It lingers briefly, then fades, leaving behind a sense of balance rather than intensity. You lower the cup. The figure across from you watches not critically, but attentively. There is no instruction given, yet you feel guided simply by the shared presence. A lesser-known but intriguing detail is that the aesthetics of imperfection, valuing irregularity and natural form, played a significant role in shaping objects and spaces during this time. You notice that now, in the cup, in the arrangement of the room, in the way, nothing feels overly refined. You set the cup down carefully. The movement feels complete in itself, not leading anywhere, not needing to. You become aware of your breathing, slower now, deeper. The outside world feels distant, not gone, but softened, as if it has stepped back to allow this moment to exist. A faint sound reaches you, not from within the room, but from beyond it. The city continues quietly present, a reminder that this stillness is part of a larger flow, not separate from it. Ongoing academic discussions consider whether such practices were accessible to many or remained limited to certain social groups, with evidence suggesting a range of participation depending on context. Sitting here, you sense both exclusivity and openness, a space shaped by tradition, yet still inviting in its simplicity. You lift your gaze slightly. The room remains unchanged, yet your perception of it has shifted. Details that once seemed minimal now feel significant. The placement of objects, the space between them, the light falling across the floor. You realize how little is needed to create this feeling. A cup, a surface, a shared presence. You take another breath. The warmth of the tea remains in your hands, though you have already set it down. It lingers like a quiet echo. A small movement draws your attention. The figure across from you adjusts their position slightly, a subtle shift that maintains balance. Even this small action feels intentional, part of the same quiet rhythm. You remain seated for a moment longer. There is no pressure to move, no expectation to fill the silence. It holds itself. Eventually you begin to rise. The motion is slow, respectful of the space, as if leaving requires the same care as entering. You step back toward the threshold, pausing briefly before crossing it. Outside, the light greets you again. It feels different now, softer, as if filtered through the stillness you have just experienced. The sounds of the street return, but they seem less sharp, more integrated. You take a breath. The experience settles within you, not as something separate, but as part of the same unfolding day. And as you step forward once more, you sense the next change already forming. Carried on, a shift in air, a hint of heat, a reminder that the seasons themselves shape everything you've seen. You step back into the open street, and the warmth greets you more directly now. It no longer rests gently on your skin. It presses a little closer, settling into your shoulders, your neck, the back of your hands. The air feels heavier, holding moisture that was not there before. You notice it in your breath. Each inhale carries a faint thickness, not uncomfortable but present enough to change how you move. You slow slightly, adjusting without thinking, letting your body match the pace the day now requires. The street looks different under this warmth. Surfaces that felt cool and dry earlier now seem to hold a subtle sheen. The wooden facades absorb the light, deepening in tone. The ground beneath your feet feels firmer, less forgiving, as if the moisture in the air has settled into it. A widely accepted observation about Kyoto's climate is that summers can be intensely humid with heat that lingers and reshapes daily routines. You feel that influence now, not as an idea, but as a physical presence guiding every step. You move toward the shade. The difference is immediate. The air is still warm, but it softens slightly, losing some of its weight. You pause for a moment beneath the overhang of a building, letting the contrast settle. Nearby, a group of people have gathered along the edge of a narrow canal. You follow their gaze. The water moves slowly, its surface reflecting the light in soft, shifting patterns. It does not rush, it drifts, carrying small fragments of leaves and debris along with it. You step closer. The air near the water feels different, cooler, touched by movement. It brushes against your skin with a faint relief, subtle but noticeable. An interesting and sometimes overlooked detail is that waterways within the city not only served practical purposes, but also provided moments of cooling and comfort during hotter months. Standing here, you understand that instinctively. The presence of water changes the space. You watch as someone dips their hand briefly into the canal, then withdraws it, letting the droplets fall. The gesture is simple, almost absent-minded, yet it carries a quiet satisfaction. You remain for a moment longer, then continue walking. The heat follows you, though it feels less sharp now that you have adjusted. Your movements become more measured, your steps placed with a steady rhythm that conserves energy rather than expends it. You notice how others move. The pace of the street has shifted again, not slower in a dramatic way, but more deliberate. People take fewer unnecessary steps. They remain in the shade when possible. Movements become efficient, guided by the need to balance effort with comfort. A reflective point raised in historical discussions is how seasonal conditions influence not only physical activity but also social patterns, with heat encouraging shorter bursts of work and longer moments of rest. You see that pattern now in the way people pause, more often in the way conversations are held in shaded spaces rather than open sun. You pass a doorway where a fan rests against the wall. Its surface is slightly curved, the material light and responsive. A person lifts it, moving it slowly back and forth, creating a faint current of air. The motion is gentle, repetitive, and effective in its simplicity. A curious detail noted in period descriptions is the widespread use of handheld fans as both practical tools and subtle expressions of style, their designs often reflecting personal taste. You notice how the fan's movement creates not only a breeze, but a small rhythm, a quiet pattern within the larger flow of the day. You continue along the street. The sky above has changed. Clouds gather slowly, their edges soft, their movement gradual. They do not block the sun entirely, but they diffuse it, creating moments where the light softens, then brightens again. You feel a shift in the air, a faint movement, a hint of something approaching. The warmth remains, but it is joined by a slight tension, as if the atmosphere is preparing for change. You look ahead. People glance upward briefly, then continue. No one stops completely, but there is an awareness, a shared sense that something is coming. The first drop of rain lands softly. You feel it on your hand, cool against the warmth of your skin. It leaves a small mark that fades almost immediately. Then another. The pattern begins slowly, scattered, uneven. The ground darkens in small spots where the drops fall, each one marking a brief moment before blending into the whole. You pause. The rain increases, not suddenly but steadily. The sound builds a soft tapping that spreads across surfaces, wood, earth, fabric, water. It fills the space without overwhelming it. An often mentioned observation in accounts of Kyoto's seasonal life is the frequency of sudden summer rains, brief but intense, shaping the rhythm of daily activity. You experience that now as the street adjusts. People move towards shelter. Doorways fill. Overhangs become gathering points. The movement is calm, practiced, as if this transition is expected, even welcomed. You step beneath a nearby eave. The rain falls just beyond you, a curtain of fine lines that blur the edges of the street. The air cools slightly, the heaviness easing as the water settles. You watch. The canal swells gently, its surface shifting with the impact of the rain. The reflections break apart, reform, then dissolve again. The scent of the air changes. It carries the freshness of rain mixing with the warmth of wood and earth, creating a new balance that feels clean, renewed. You take a slow breath. The sound of the rain becomes steady, almost rhythmic. It fills the spaces between other sounds, softening, then blending them into a single continuous presence. You remain there for a moment. The heat has not disappeared, but it has changed, tempered by the rain, made more bearable. Eventually the rain begins to ease. The drops become lighter, more spaced, the sound fading gradually rather than stopping. The street emerges again, surfaces darken, the air cooler. People step out from shelter. Movement resumes, though slightly altered, as if the city has been gently reset. You step forward. The ground feels different, beneath your feet damp, slightly softer. The air rests more lightly against your skin, and as you continue you sense the season itself, shaping every detail, guiding the city through cycles that repeat, shift and return, each one leaving its quiet mark on the day. You walk on as the dampness settles into the ground and the air clears, leaving behind that fresh, softened feeling that follows rain. The light returns, slowly filtered at first, then growing steadier again. The warmth is gentler now, less pressing, as if the day itself has taken a small step back. The street feels quieter after the rain, not silent, but calmer. Movements resume, though, with a certain care as people step around darker patches of earth and avoid the deeper impressions left by water. You find yourself doing the same, adjusting your steps without thinking. A leaf sticks to the ground near your foot. It was dry before, curled and light. Now it lies flat, its shape more defined, its colour deepened by the moisture. You pause for a brief second to notice it, then continue. The air carries a different scent now. Less of heat, more of earth. A faint trace of smoke returns, rising again from rekindled fires, blending with the freshness left behind by the rain. It feels balanced, neither heavy nor sharp. A widely observed aspect of life in Kyoto is how seasonal transitions shape preparation, especially as summer gives way to autumn, bringing changes in food, clothing, and daily routines. You begin to sense that shift here, not as a sudden change, but as a quiet adjustment taking place beneath the surface. You move toward a part of the street where activity feels more grounded again. A person stands near a doorway, spreading something out onto a flat surface. You step closer and see that it's food laid carefully to dry in the returning warmth. Each piece is placed with space between it, allowing air to move freely. The process is slow, deliberate. The person checks each piece, turning it, slightly adjusting its position. There is no rush, only attention. An interesting detail found in historical descriptions is the importance of preservation techniques such as drying and fermenting, which allowed households to prepare for cooler seasons ahead. Watching this, you understand how much of the future is quietly built in moments like this. You continue walking. The street stretches ahead and you begin to notice small signs of preparation everywhere. Bundles of materials stacked neatly, tools set aside for repair, roof edges inspected, small adjustments made where needed. Nothing dramatic, just a series of small actions, each one contributing to something larger. You pass a house where someone stands on a low step checking the edge of the roof. Their hands move carefully along the surface, pressing lightly, ensuring everything is secure. They pause, look, then make a small correction. A reflective idea explored in historical studies is how seasonal awareness encouraged a continuous cycle of maintenance where preparation was not a separate task, but woven into daily life. You see that here in the quiet persistence of these actions. You walk on, feeling the ground shift slightly beneath your feet. It is still damp but beginning to dry. The surface holds your steps a little more softly, then releases them. It creates a subtle rhythm, a gentle give and return. A breeze moves through the street. It's cooler now, carrying a hint of something that feels like change. Not cold, not sharp, but different from the earlier warmth. You notice it on your skin, a light touch that lingers for just a moment. You take a deeper breath. The air feels clearer, easier to hold. A curious detail mentioned in some records is that people often adjusted their diets and daily habits gradually as the seasons shifted, incorporating preserved foods and altering routines in response to the environment. You begin to notice that transition in the types of items being handled in the pace of preparation. You pass another doorway where someone arranges items into containers. The containers are simple, their surfaces worn smooth from use. Each item is placed carefully, not just stored, but organized in a way that suggests future need. You pause briefly. There is something reassuring in this quiet preparation, something that speaks of continuity of planning without urgency. You move on. The light continues to change, softening slightly as the day progresses. Shadows stretch a little longer, edges becoming less sharp. The brightness of earlier hours fades into something more even. You notice how the city feels steadier now, less defined by bursts of activity, more by consistent underlying rhythm. The movements of people, the placement of objects, the small adjustments all align in a quiet flow. An ongoing discussion among scholars considers how much of this seasonal rhythm was guided by necessity versus cultural practice, with evidence suggesting a blend of both. As you walk, it feels inseparable. The environment shapes behavior, and behavior in turn reflects understanding. You pass a final scene that draws your attention. A person sits near the edge of the street mending a tool rather than clothing this time. Their hands move with the same care you have seen throughout the day, adjusting, tightening, restoring. It is the same pattern. Use, wear, repair, continue. You watch for a moment, then step forward again. The street begins to widen slightly, the sense of preparation fading into the broader movement of the city. The air remains cool, the ground nearly dry, the light soft and steady. You take a breath. The shift toward autumn, subtle as it is, feels present now. Not fully arrived, but approaching, carried in the air in the actions of those around you. And as you continue walking, you sense another change ahead. One that will bring a deeper quiet, a colder touch, and a different kind of stillness waiting just beyond the warmth of this fading day. You move forward as the light thins further, the warmth of the day settling into something softer, less insistent. The air carries a cooler edge now, not sharp but noticeable enough that your skin responds, tightening slightly, adjusting to the change without resistance. The street grows quieter, not empty but more contained. Movements slow, conversations shorten. The energy that carried the day begins to fold inward as if the city itself is preparing to rest. You feel it in your hands first, a faint coolness lingering longer than before. You bring them closer together, instinctively conserving warmth, even though the cold is not for you. A firmly grounded historical understanding indicates that winters in Kyoto, though not extreme compared to some regions, could feel particularly harsh within wooden homes that offered little insulation. You begin to sense why. Even now, before the deeper cold sets in the air, carries a clarity that reaches through layers of fabric. You pass a doorway where a small brazier has been placed. A thin thread of smoke rises from it, carrying a faint dry scent. The heat it gives off is subtle, not strong, but enough to create a small pocket of warmth in the surrounding air. You step closer. The difference is immediate. The coolness recedes slightly, replaced by a gentle warmth that settles into your hands and face. It does not spread far, but within its small range it feels complete. An intriguing detail often noted in accounts of daily life is the use of portable heating devices such as braziers, which provided localized warmth rather than heating entire spaces. Standing here, you understand the practicality of that approach. It is not about changing the environment, but about creating small areas of comfort within it. You move on. The street continues, but with a different tone now. The earlier fluidity has given way to something more contained. People walk with their shoulders slightly raised, their movements more compact, conserving energy. You notice the clothing again. Layers appear thicker, more closely wrapped. Sleeves are drawn in collars adjusted to protect the neck. The fabrics feel heavier, their weight more apparent in the way they move. You adjust your own posture, pulling your arms in slightly, stepping with a steadier rhythm that keeps warmth within your body. A faint sound reaches you, the soft crackle of fire. You follow it to another doorway where a small group sits around a brazier. Their positions are close not out of necessity but for shared warmth. Hands extend towards the heat, then withdraw, then return again in a quiet cycle. A reflective observation raised in historical discussions suggests that winter encouraged closer physical proximity within households, shaping social interactions in subtle but meaningful ways. You see that here in the way people gather, not speaking much but sharing space. You continue walking. The light has changed again. It is lower now, stretching across the street at an angle that casts long, gentle shadows. The brightness has softened, replaced by a muted glow that feels calmer, less demanding. You take a slow breath. The air is clearer, carrying fewer scents, but those that remain feel sharper. Wood smoke faint but distinct, the dry edge of cold beginning to settle in. A curious detail mentioned in some accounts is that people will often warm their hands by placing them inside their sleeves, using the body's own heat to maintain comfort. You notice that now, in the way several passers-by hold their arms, hands, hidden posture, slightly folded inward. You mirror the motion, sliding your hands into the warmth of your sleeves, feeling the fabric hold the heat close. You walk on. The street narrows again, the buildings drawing closer, creating a sense of enclosure that feels almost protective. The wind, such as it is, lessens here, allowing the air to settle more evenly. You notice how sound changes. Footsteps, a softer voice is quieter. The overall tone of the city has lowered, as if responding to the cooling air. Scholars continue to examine how seasonal hardship influenced daily routines, with some emphasizing resilience and adaptation, while others point to the constant negotiation between comfort and necessity. As you move through this space, you feel that balance in every small adjustment. You pass a final scene that holds your attention. A person stands at the threshold of their home, pausing before stepping inside. They turn slightly, looking out at the street for just a moment longer, as if taking in the fading light, the cooling air, the quiet shift of the day. Then they step in, sliding the door closed behind them. The sound is soft vinyl in a gentle way. You continue forward. The street ahead grows dimmer, the light retreating slowly. The warmth of the day has nearly gone, replaced by a calm, steady coolness that settles into everything. You take a breath. The air feels thinner, now clearer, each inhale more defined. And as you walk, you sense the city preparing for something else. Not just rest, but vigilance. A quiet awareness that follows the fading of light, waiting just beyond the edge of evening. You continue into the dimming light, and the street settles into a quieter, more watchful rhythm. The last warmth of the day has slipped away, leaving behind a cool, steady air that feels clearer with each breath. The sky above deepens in tone, not yet dark, but no longer bright, holding that brief space between. You notice the change in sound first. Footsteps grow more deliberate. Voices soften further, as if the fading light draws them inward. Even the smallest movements seem more noticeable now, each one standing out against the growing stillness. You walk a little slower, not from fatigue but from awareness. The space around you feels different, less about movement and more about attention. A well-established understanding of Kyoto in this period is that fire posed one of the greatest dangers in a city built largely of wood and paper, making vigilance an essential part of daily life, especially after dark. As you move forward, you begin to sense that awareness in subtle ways. A faint call carries through the street, not loud, not urgent, but clear enough to be heard. It echoes briefly, then fades, leaving behind a trace of presence. You do not see where it comes from at first, but you feel its purpose. You turn slightly and notice a figure moving along the edge of the street. They carry a lantern, its light small but steady, casting a soft glow that shifts with each step. The movement is measured, the pace consistent. They pause briefly at intervals, calling out again, the sound marking their passage. An intriguing detail often noted in historical accounts is the role of night watchmen who patrolled neighbourhoods to monitor fire risk and maintain order, their call serving as both warning and reassurance. You watch as the figure continues their presence, quiet but significant. The lantern light draws your eye. It does not illuminate the entire street, only a small circle around the figure. Beyond it, the shadows deepen, blending into one another. You continue walking. The ground beneath your feet feels cooler. Now the earlier warmth completely gone. Each step lands with a soft, muted sound absorbed by the earth rather than carried. You notice how doors begin to close. One by one, sliding panels move into place, the soft sound of wood meeting wood marking the transition. The open glimpses of earlier hours disappear, replaced by smooth surfaces that reflect the faint light. A reflective idea explored in historical studies is how nightfall reshaped urban awareness, heightening sensitivity to sound and movement in ways that daylight did not require. You feel that now in the way your senses adjust, in how even a small sound draws your attention more fully. You pause briefly. A faint breeze moves through the street cooler than before, carrying with it the dry scent of evening. It brushes against your face, then fades, leaving the air still again. You look upward. The sky has deepened further. The first stars beginning to appear, faint but steady. They seem distant yet present, a quiet reminder of the larger world beyond the city. You lower your gaze. The street continues dim but navigable. The lantern carried by the watchman has moved further away, its light, now smaller, softer but still visible. A curious detail mentioned in some records is that residents often kept water and tools ready at hand in case of fire, integrating preparedness into their nightly routines. You begin to notice signs of that now. Buckets placed near doorways, ladders resting against walls, objects positioned not for use in the moment but for what might be needed. You walk on. The silence deepens, though it is never complete. A distant footstep, the faint rustle of fabric, the soft creak of wood settling as the temperature drops. Each sound exists clearly, then fades. You become aware of your own movement. Your steps are quieter, now more careful. You avoid loose ground, adjust your pace to match the stillness around you. It feels natural, as if the night itself guides you. The lantern light disappears around a corner. The street grows dimmer. For a moment you stand in that softer darkness, your eyes adjusting your awareness, expanding to fill the space. Scholars continue to examine how fear and familiarity coexisted in nighttime environments, with some suggesting that darkness heightened anxiety, while others emphasize the routines that made it manageable. As you stand here, you feel both. A quiet alertness balanced by a sense of order. You take a slow breath. The air is cool, steady, carrying very little scent now. It feels clean, almost empty, allowing each breath to stand on its own. You begin to walk again. The street ahead remains calm, the city settling further into itself. The movement of the day has fully given way to a quieter presence, one that holds rather than pushes. You pass a final doorway where a small light glows within. Its faint, barely visible through the thin screen, but it suggests life continuing inside, separate yet connected. You pause for just a moment, then you step forward again, following the dim path as it leads you deeper into the night, where the boundaries between stillness and motion blur, and the city holds itself in a careful, quiet balance. You continue into the quiet night, and the city feels thinner now, as if much of its daytime presence has folded away behind closed doors and dimmed lights. The street stretches ahead in soft darkness, shaped more by memory than by clear outlines. Your steps guide you as much as your eyes do. The air is cooler still. It settles gently around you, no longer changing, no longer shifting with the sun. It feels steady, almost still, carrying only the faintest traces of scent. A hint of smoke lingers thin and dry, drifting from somewhere unseen. You walk slowly. There is no reason to hurry, and the night seems to prefer it this way. Each step lands softly, absorbed by the ground, leaving no echo behind. A commonly accepted understanding of life in early modern cities like Kyoto is that illness and uncertainty were constant companions with limited medical knowledge, shaping how people responded to sickness. As you move through the quiet, you begin to sense that layer of life not visible in the open street, but present within the spaces you pass. A faint sound reaches you, a cough. It comes from behind a closed door, brief but clear, then fades. The silence that follows feels deeper, not empty but aware. You pause for a moment. The sound does not repeat. The street remains still. You continue walking. A small light flickers behind another paper screen, its glow uneven, shifting slightly as if stirred by a movement within. You cannot see clearly, only the suggestion of figures, the soft outline of motion. An intriguing detail sometimes noted in historical descriptions is the use of herbal remedies and traditional treatments often prepared within the home, blending practical knowledge with belief. You imagine that here in the quiet glow behind the screen, someone tending to another, measuring, mixing, waiting. You pass without stopping. The night holds these moments privately. Further along, you notice a doorway slightly ajar. The opening is small, just enough to reveal a sliver of the interior. You see a figure seated, their posture still, their attention focused on something in their hands. The light beside them is dim, casting long shadows that move as they shift. You do not look too long. It feels as though these moments are not meant to be fully seen, only sensed. Scholars continue to explore how communities responded to illness in this period, with some emphasizing shared support networks, while others highlight the limitations and uncertainties that shaped outcomes. As you walk, you feel both possibilities in the quiet spaces around you. The street narrows slightly. The buildings draw closer, the darkness deepening between them. Your steps slow even further, guided by familiarity more than sight. You notice how sound travels now. Even the smallest movement seems to carry farther, yet remain soft. The rustle of your clothing, the faint shift of your weight, all of it becomes part of the night's texture. A curious detail mentioned in some records is that people often relied on subtle signs, sounds, changes in breathing, small movements to understand health and well-being in the absence of modern tools. You think of that now as you pass another closed door, listening, without meaning to, aware of the quiet life continuing within. You take a breath. The air feels clear, almost empty, allowing each inhale to stand alone. It sharpens your awareness not through intensity, but through simplicity. You continue walking. The street begins to open slightly, the darkness easing just enough to reveal more of the path ahead. A faint glow appears in the distance, not bright but steady. You move toward it. As you draw closer, you see that it comes from a small gathering. A few figures stand together, their voices low, their movements restrained. They are not engaged in lively conversation, but in something quieter, a shared presence rather than active exchange. You remain at the edge. The light they hold creates a small circle illuminating their faces, just enough to show calm expressions, attentive but relaxed. You do not step closer. It feels complete without your presence within it. A reflective observation found in historical discussions suggests that moments of shared quiet, especially at night, played an important role in maintaining social bonds even without words. You sense that here in the stillness that holds the group together. After a moment you move on. The light fades behind you, the darkness returning to its softer, more even tone. You become aware of your own body again. The steady rhythm of your steps, the coolness of the air against your skin, the quiet of your breath. Everything feels aligned with the pace of the night. You pass one last doorway. No light shows from within, no sound escapes. It stands closed still, part of the larger silence. You pause briefly, then continue. The street ahead stretches into a calm, uninterrupted path, the city resting, holding its quiet layers within walls and behind screens. And as you walk, you feel the night deepen, not into emptiness, but into a space where everything continues gently unseen, just like for the return of light. You continue along the quiet path, and the darkness begins to soften rather than deepen, as if the night has reached its fullest point and now holds steady. The air remains cool, but it no longer sharpens. It settles gentle and even, wrapping around the city in a calm that feels complete. Your steps slow further, not from uncertainty, but from the sense that there is no need to move quickly anymore. The world around you has already quieted into its final rhythm, and you find yourself matching it without effort. Ahead, a faint glow begins to appear, not from a single source, but from several scattered along the street. Small lights, steady and contained, marking places where activity is not fully. You move toward them. The glow reveals a wider space where the street opens just enough to hold a gathering. It is not crowded, not loud, but fuller than the areas you have just passed through. You step to the edge and pause. Figures move slowly within the space, their actions measured. their voices low but present. There is a sense of shared attention, as if everyone here is aware of the moment in a way that does not require explanation. A well-documented feature of Kyoto life is the presence of seasonal festivals and communal observances, which brought people together in ways that contrasted with the quieter routines of daily work. Standing here, you feel a trace of that collective energy even in this subdued form. A small procession begins to take shape. It is not grand, not elaborate, but it carries intention. A few individuals move in a line, their steps aligned, their movements calm. They carry simple objects held carefully, not displayed but respected. You watch as they pass. The light they carry shifts gently with each step, casting soft patterns on the ground. The shadows move with them, stretching, folding, then settling again. An intriguing aspect sometimes highlighted in historical descriptions is how even modest gatherings could carry deep symbolic meaning, connecting participants to cycles of season belief and community. You sense that here not through explanation, but through the atmosphere itself. You remain still. The procession continues, then gradually disperses, the line dissolving into smaller groups, then into individuals who return to their paths. The space does not empty immediately. People linger, standing quietly, exchanging brief words or simply remaining present. There is no urgency to leave, no push to move on. You take a slow breath. The air feels balanced, neither cool nor warm, carrying only the faintest traces of smoke and night. It settles easily in your lungs. A reflective theme explored in historical scholarship is how communal moments provided a sense of continuity within the changing rhythms of life, offering reassurance through shared experience. As you stand here, that feeling is clear even without fully understanding its origins. You notice a small detail. Near the edge of the space, a child stands beside an older figure, their posture calm, their gaze steady. The child does not fidget or move restlessly. They simply watch, absorbing the scene. A curious note found in some records suggests that participation in such gatherings often began at a young age, allowing traditions to pass quietly from one generation to the next. You see that continuity here in the stillness of the child, in the patience of their observation. You begin to move again. The gathering remains behind you, its light fading gradually as you step back into the quieter street. The darkness feels softer now, less deep, as if the presence of others has left a trace that lingers. Your steps carry you forward. The street stretches ahead, calm and open, the sounds of the gathering dissolving into the distance. You notice how your body feels, steady, grounded, aligned with the pace of the night. There is no tension, no urgency, only a quiet awareness of each movement. The sky above holds its depth, but the first hint of change begins to appear. Not light, not yet, but a subtle easing, a sense that the darkness is no longer deepening but holding, waiting. Scholars continue to discuss how cycles of night and day shape perception in pre-modern cities, influencing not only routines but the way people experience time itself. As you walk, you feel that cycle turning not through clocks or signals but through the atmosphere itself. You pass one final doorway. A faint light glows within, steady and calm. It does not flicker. It simply exists, marking a quiet presence inside. You pause briefly, then continue. The street ahead feels open, ready, as if preparing to welcome the first signs of morning once again. And as you walk, you carry with you the layered impressions of the day, each one settling gently into place, forming a quiet understanding that moves with you into the final moments before rest. You continue along the quiet street as the final stretch of night settles into a gentle stillness that feels complete rather than empty. The air rests lightly against your skin, cool but no longer sharp, as if it has softened with the passing hours. Your steps are slow now, unhurried, guided more by rhythm than intention. The city around you feels as though it is holding its breath, not in tension but in rest. The sounds have thinned to the smallest details. A distant footstep that fades almost immediately. The faint shift of wood as a structure settles. Your own breathing steady and even. You walk without needing to look ahead. The path feels familiar now, shaped by all the moments you have passed through. The ground beneath your feet responds gently, each step absorbed, each movement part of the same quiet pattern. A widely recognized understanding of life in cities like Kyoto is that daily routines were closely tied to natural cycles, with night and day shaping not only activity but awareness itself. As you move through these final moments of darkness, you feel that connection fully. There is no separation between time and experience. They are the same. The sky begins to change. At first, it is almost imperceptible. A slight easing of the darkness, a softening of the deep tones that have held the night together. You would miss it if you were not already paying attention. You slow even further. The edges of buildings begin to emerge not clearly but as suggestions. Shapes return faint and quiet, like memories coming into focus. An intriguing detail often mentioned in historical observations is how people in pre-modern cities became attuned to subtle environmental changes using light, temperature, and sound as cues rather than relying on mechanical timekeeping. You sense that awareness now not as a skill you learned, but as something that has grown naturally through the day. You take a slow breath. The air feels different again. It carries a faint freshness, a hint of something new, though nothing has visibly changed. It is a promise more than a presence. You continue walking. The street remains empty but not abandoned. It feels ready, as if waiting for the return of movement, of sound, of the gentle unfolding you experienced before. Scholarly perspectives often explore how such daily cycles created a sense of continuity that grounded individuals within their environment, offering stability through repetition. As you walk, that continuity feels complete. The end of this night is not separate from the beginning of the next day. It is part of the same flow. You pause for a moment. The sky lightens just a little more. It is still dim, still quiet, but the change is now undeniable. The darkness no longer holds everything. It begins to release. A curious note from historical description suggests that early risers often moved through the city before others woke, experiencing a brief moment where the world felt entirely their own. Standing here, you understand that feeling. The space belongs to no one and to everyone at once. You take another step. The ground feels slightly different, again, less cool, more balanced. The air settles evenly, no longer shifting, no longer changing. You realize how still you feel. Not tired, not restless, but calm in a way that holds you gently. The day behind you, the night around you, and the morning ahead all seem to exist at once. You look ahead. The first true hint of light appears along the horizon, soft and pale, spreading slowly, not rushing, not forcing its way in. It simply arrives. You stand for a moment longer. Then you begin to walk again. Your steps carry you forward into that faint light, into the beginning that mirrors the one you first entered. The same quiet, the same gentle unfolding waiting to begin again. And as you move, the city prepares to wake once more. Now the pace slows even further. Your steps grow softer, almost weightless. The sounds fade until they are barely there. The air becomes smoother, wrapping around you like a light blanket. You no longer need to focus on where you are going. The path carries you. The light continues to grow, but gently, never sharp, never demanding. It fills the space slowly, allowing your eyes to rest, to soften. Your breathing matches it. Slow, even quiet. You feel the ground beneath you steady and reassuring. You feel the air against your skin cool and calm. You feel the stillness around you holding everything in place. There is nothing left to do, nothing to follow, nothing to notice. Only this. The city rests, the light grows, and you drift gently with it, carried forward without effort, without thought, into a space where everything is calm, everything is quiet, and everything is enough. Sweet dream.